Hi, everybody, and welcome to Lesson 5 of the writing modules for Advanced Literature. I'm David Marler, and I'm going to be giving you guys this course on writing your conclusion or your final paragraph. And what we're going to be talking about in this course is the parts of the conclusion, restating your thesis, summarizing a key point, and your final thought, and then, of course, your homework for next module. Now, this is, of course, a much shorter lesson than the rest, and that has to do with the fact that we're only talking about one paragraph, and in many ways, it's the easiest paragraph that you have to write because you're not doing anything new. You're just summarizing everything that you've said already in the previous 4 paragraphs. So let's go through the conclusion, and I want to first start off with a few rules. So, rule number 1 is that in the conclusion, you never introduce new information. So you're essentially summarizing everything that you've said before. You make sure that your conclusion is not an exhaustive summary of your entire essay. So you keep everything concise. You're not going to summarize every single point. You're going to try to make it as short as possible. And your conclusion needs to remind the reader of what you discuss and leave them with a final thought or a feeling. So let's go through the steps of what you have to do when you're writing your conclusion. Now, step number 1 is that you're going to restate your thesis. So you look at your thesis statement that said, for the purpose of this essay, and you're going to rewrite it. And the way that you rewrite it is you kind of keep the essential information, but you're going to possibly change some of the words. And this is really, this is a literature essay. So this is not a scientific essay. If you're dealing with something, for instance, when you're doing your thesis on education and in your final year, you're not going to be restating your thesis in this way. So here's an example. So what we have here is that this thesis statement that we had for this essay was, for the purpose of this essay, I will examine the societal expectations that Darius and Holden are confronted with, how these clash with their own individual desires, and what these works say about the inner struggle of young people in their respective worlds. Now, the way that I've rewritten that is that I have to be more authoritative. So I have to make sure that I'm not that I'm making kind of bolder statements than I had in my first paragraph. So here I wrote, in both The Catcher in the Rye and Darius the Great is Not Okay, the young male protagonist must live up to societal expectations which clash with their own identities and aspirations, giving the reader a look into the struggles of young men in their respective worlds. So, as you can see right here, I've now taken this statement that was for the purpose of this essay, saying what I will do, and I've changed it into what I have done, and I've become quite authoritative. And you can see here that, I've made a few stylistic choices, like not using the name Darius and Holden, because by this time in paragraph 5, the previous 4 paragraphs have referred to these 2 characters extensively. So I wrote down the young male protagonist. Now, the next part of your conclusion is 1 key point per paragraph. So what you need to do is you need to go through each of the 3 body paragraphs that you had, and you have to write down kind of 1 key point, just a few sentences or a few words per sentence. And you want to make sure that you want to look at what the most important concept or idea is that you've explored in each paragraph. And you have to, when you're thinking about this, consider whether you've used the point-by-point method, so whether you've gone through, compared in each body paragraph both books, or whether you've done the block method, where you've spent 1 paragraph on one book, 1 paragraph on another book, and then your 3rd paragraph is kind of a compare and contrast. So what we've done then is that when I look at this right here, I can then combine these points, and then I'm going to get something that looks like this. So young adult literature often introduces the young reader to the adult world and societal rules. In both The Catcher in the Rye and Darius the Great is Not Okay, the young male protagonists are confronted by a world with expectations that they seemingly cannot live up to. In The Catcher in the Rye, Holden finds himself constantly having to conform to society's expectations of him. He's supposed to go to school, get into a good college, graduate, and start a career, yet he sees this adult world and all of its hypocrisy as phony. The gender norms of the 50s, where he is supposed to be an emotionalist stoic male, seem impossible. Darius the Great is Not Okay, similarly finds himself caught between 2 dueling worlds and cultures. Much like Holden, Darius is supposed to enjoy manly things like sports, and his father wants him to stand up for himself. As a young man with depression, he finds it hard to live up to the expectations of his Iranian family, who dismiss his mental health issues as a quirk. In both works, we see how these protagonists seem to almost drown under these rigid societal expectations. And while it is hard for them to grasp what is expected of them, they also find it difficult to accept the reality of a harsh adult world. So this was one of our body paragraphs. And when we look at this here, I now have to think, hey, what is the most important message from this paragraph? So if you look at this, what I came here was the very last sentence. So in both works, we see how these protagonists almost seem to drown under these rigid societal expectations. And while it is hard for them to grasp what is expected of them, they all find it difficult to accept the reality of a harsh adult world. So I'm going to essentially take that last sentence where I'm kind of, showing my main point, where I'm giving my brief discussion, and I'm going to make it as small as possible into a quick statement. So if we look here, we can see that we have the following points. So our conclusion up until now. So we've restated the thesis in both The Catcher in the Rye and Darius the Great is Not Okay. The young male protagonist must live up to societal expectations which clash with their own identities and aspirations, giving the reader a look into the struggles of young men in their respective worlds. Then I'm going to go into the most important point. So in both works, we see how these protagonists seem to almost drown under rigid societal expectations, and while it's hard for them to grasp what is expected of them, they also find it difficult to accept the reality of the harsh adult world. And that's the sentence that we just had from that last paragraph, but I'm going to have to make it shorter because otherwise you're going to end up having an extremely long paragraph, and that is not the point of a conclusion. So I'm going to make it shorter, and I'm going to change this into Darius and Holden cannot escape the world's expectations, nor can they accept the reality of the adult world. So I'm going to do the same thing again, except for now I'm going to have apart from the other two body paragraphs. So then we get, as you can see all the way at the bottom, Darius and Holden cannot escape the world's expectations, nor can they accept the reality of the adult world. Both characters are thus forced to create their own identities. For Darius, this means forging a positive bond with his father. For Holden, this does not end well. He ends up in a sanatorium, nostalgic for the people he once criticized. So what we have here is we can see now that this most important point, we've restated our thesis. We have the main points from 1 through 3, and you can see that I've kind of taken the main point from each body paragraph and created a new one. And finally, we get to the last part, which is the clincher. So in the clincher, this is the final powerful sentence that provides a strong closure. It leaves a lasting impression and it drives home your main point, acting like a knockout punch by summarizing the essay's significance or prompting a final thought. And this is very much like the hook in the very first sentence of the essay. It's a way to kind of give the reader a good feeling or to give them an emotion when they're finished reading it with kind of this main point. And you can be quite creative here. So the way that I've done with this essay is I've come up with this. In these two young men, we see two different outcomes of a turbulent adolescence. One is able to forge a new identity and come to terms with adulthood, and one is unable to, thus finding himself imprisoned in his own thoughts. Now, finally, we get to our final paragraph, as you can see here, and I'm going to have to do some revision. So I've gone through my 3 parts. I've restated my thesis in new words. I've taken a point from each body paragraph and shortened them, and I've ended with my final closing statement, my gut punch. But when we go through it, we're going to see that a lot of words are kind of difficult. There's a lot of repetition because this is one of the main issues that you have to watch out for when scaffolding, when using scaffolding as a way of as a way to learn how to write. So when we look here, let's look at some of the choices that I've made. So in both The Catcher in the Rye and Darius the Great is Not Okay, the young male protagonist must live up to the societal expectations that clash with their own identities and aspirations, giving the reader a look into the struggles of young men in their respective worlds. Darius and Holden cannot escape the world's expectations, nor can they accept the reality of the adult world. Both characters are thus forced to create their own identities. For Darius, this means forging a positive bond with his father. For Holden, this does not end well. He ends up, and then instead of using the old-fashioned term in a sanatorium, which is the word that they used in the novel, I just say hospitalized, nostalgic for the people he once criticized. And here I have in these two young men, but of course I've used that already. So these stories offer the reader two different outcomes of a turbulent adolescence. One young man is able to forge a new identity and come to terms with adulthood, and the other is unable to do so, thus finding himself imprisoned by his own thoughts. So that ends up being quite a good sentence. And of course, once you're finished writing, this should be what you do in every paragraph, that you go through, hey, am I using the same word over and over again? And we'll go over that a little bit later in your final writing lesson. And in order to reach your final writing lesson, you're going to have to do the homework for lesson 6. So a lot of you up until now have been writing this single essay based on 2 novels from the course that you've taken. So what you're going to do is you're going to download a document that is on Brightspace that it has this kind of scaffolding form. It's a Word document that's going to have boxes where you fill in each sentence, so that you follow the exact form that we've learned up until now, which means having a hook, focus, and thesis, and using TTEB for each body paragraph. And now it's going to include the information from the final paragraph. So you're going to write the essay in there, and then once you're finished, you're going to copy and paste each of those individual sentences, and then once you're there, you're then going to revise. So you're going to do that kind of stylistic change in your essays. You have to download this, fill it in, you can upload it again, and then you'll be able to reach our final lesson, which is lesson 6, and that is how to prepare for the exam. Thank you.